Tells Iraq we can't and won't do it for you as he considers how to help a nation back on the brink. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Bret Baier. The U.S. will help those who help themselves. That's the message tonight from President Obama as he deals with a resurgence in Islamist extremism in Iraq. He's promising some aid, but no troops, and telling the Iraqis they need to step up themselves and solve their political differences. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Jennifer Griffin's at the Pentagon with a look at who the Iraqi militants are and what they want. But we begin with senior White House Foreign Affairs correspondent Wendell Goler and the president's message today. Good evening, Wendell.
Good evening, Brett. The president is still deciding what he will do, but he says there's nothing the U.S. can do to make Iraq's Sunni and Shia Muslims live together peacefully. That, he says, is something they're going to have to do for themselves. As militant fighters celebrated the seizure of Iraq's second largest city and Iraq's prime minister called for U.S. airstrikes to keep them out of Baghdad, President Obama said he'd consider it only if Iraq's Shia leadership agreed to share power more broadly with the Sunni minority.
The United States is not simply going to involve itself in a military action in the absence of a political plan by the Iraqis that gives us some assurance that they're prepared to work together. Mr.
Obama met with his national security team in the Oval Office, but did not take senior security advisors along on a trip to North Dakota and California. House Armed Services Committee Chairman Ed Royce said in a written statement, quote, "The president and his team need to be acting urgently, not reviewing options in the days ahead." And retired Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis says they should have seen this coming.
He's always late. In this particular situation, we could have totally anticipated what's happening.
Nouri al-Maliki, the Shia leader installed after the fall of Saddam Hussein, has steadily purged the government and military of Sunni leadership. Blaming U.S. troops for civilian casualties, he refused to give a small U.S. counterterrorism force immunity from prosecution in the country's courts, though some analysts say President Obama didn't try hard enough to convince him. Now, the Sunni insurgents have expanded Syria's civil war well across the Iraqi border. Some Sunnis in the Iraqi army have deserted and abandoned their American weapons, and Iran's threatening to protect Shia holy sites in Iraq, all of which threatens a regional war.
I think the king in Jordan is in trouble. I think if I were Netanyahu, I would be very nervous about what's happening in Lebanon. As soon as Iraq, further crumbles, you're going to have the rest just follow suit.
But after hundreds of billions of dollars and 4,500 American lives lost in Iraq, Mr. Obama is reluctant to spend more.
Our troops and the American people and the American taxpayers made huge investments and sacrifices in order to give Iraqis the opportunity to chart a better course, a better destiny. But ultimately, they're going to have to seize it.
The president says so far the insurgents haven't been able to disrupt Iraqi oil supplies, but he plans talks with OPEC leaders in coming days about picking up the slack in case Iraq's oil is cut off. Brett?
Wendell Goler live on the North Lawn. Wendell, thank you. Who are the insurgents, the terrorists, threatening to plunge Iraq into civil war once again? National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has some answers tonight from the Pentagon.
The president ruled out putting U.S. boots on the ground and said no decisions about military action would be made this weekend. The commander-in-chief signaled, much as the Pentagon has in recent days, that this is the Iraqis' fight.
We can't do it for them. And in the absence of this type of political effort, short-term military action, including any assistance we might provide, won't succeed.
Meanwhile, as fighters from ISIS, also known as ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, took more towns on the march to Baghdad, the Pentagon continued to plan.
But I can tell you they cover a wide range of military capabilities and will be designed, as the president said, to help break the momentum of ISIL's progress and bolster Iraqi security forces. But clearly, any decision to employ these options rests solely with the commander-in-chief.
The leader of the insurgency, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, was imprisoned by the U.S. 4 years ago in southern Iraq. It's not clear why he was released. The FBI has offered a $10 million reward for his capture. The cities in Iraq that have already fallen to these Sunni jihadists report the group is imposing Sharia law and beheading Iraqi troops.
ISIL is a terrorist organization. It is so extreme that even al-Qaeda saw fit at one point to try to disassociate itself to some degree from it.
But the military options being presented to the president are not ideal, according to current and former officials alike.
You're going to start shooting up streets from the air in Mosul and killing civilians. You're going to be seen as backing a government that doesn't respect the will of all the Iraqi people. You're going to put in drones when we don't have a very good intelligence picture.
The Pentagon estimates the speed at which the insurgents took territory surprised U.S. defense officials after the U.S. spent $17 billion training the Iraqi military.
I could not have predicted, however, the extent to which ISIS could be effective in seizing cities in Iraq and trying to erase boundaries to create an Islamic State. That's why it's a wicked problem.
I mean, we're certainly disappointed by the performance of some Iraqi security force units with respect to the challenges that they have faced in the last few days.
The U.S. has increased the number of surveillance drones it is flying over Iraq at the request of the Iraqi government. Shiite Islamic leaders in Baghdad are urging Shia fighters to step up to defend the capital. And for now, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad is operating normally. Brett?
Jennifer Griffin, live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. We have more alarming information tonight. This about a possible linkage with one of the Taliban leaders released in the trade for American POW Bo Bergdahl with the 9/11 attacks. To explain that, here's Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge.
A review of the Guantanamo military files and the 9/11 Commission report suggests one of the Taliban 5, swapped for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, may have played a supporting role leading up to the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil. In the week before 9/11, the Taliban and al-Qaeda began neutralizing their opposition in Afghanistan. On September 9, 2001, the leader of the U.S.-backed Northern Alliance, Ahmad Shah Massoud, was killed by a suicide bomber. With their main opposition dead, on September 10th, former Guantanamo detainee Mohammed Fazl began a major military offensive. The following day, with the U.S.-backed Northern Alliance on its heels and the threat of retaliation apparently reduced, 19 hijackers took over 4 jets and murdered nearly 3,000 Americans. The analysis was first reported by Thomas Joslin of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies.
One of the things you have to do is look at the biographies of all 5 of these guys, and it becomes very clear that all 5 were very closely tied to al-Qaeda prior to 9/11.
While none of the documents comes close to suggesting Fazl knew about the 9/11 plot in advance, the military assessment clearly states that he never came clean on the strength of his terrorist ties. Quote, detainee withholds details of his full relationship with Taliban Supreme Leader Mullah Omar and his close association with senior Taliban and al-Qaeda personnel. And this UN sanctions document states that Fazl went to the same al-Qaeda training camp in Afghanistan as some of the Mosul hijackers.
The idea that the Taliban is not a valuable ally for al-Qaeda or isn't deeply embedded with al-Qaeda is just false.
This week, Hillary Clinton, along with current administration officials, downplayed the risk of transferring the men.
These 5 guys are not a threat to the United States. They are a threat to the safety and security of Afghanistan and Pakistan.
And today, the State Department dismissed reports of Fazl's pre-9/11 activity.
We have no indication they had ever plotted or been part of a plot to conduct terrorist attacks.
This week, a senior intelligence official told lawmakers in a classified briefing that the intelligence community believes 4 of the 5 men are likely to return to the fight based on the most recent assessment in 2013, and Mohammed Fazl is among them, Brett.
Catherine, thank you. Sergeant Bo Bergdahl is back on U.S. soil tonight at an Army medical facility in San Antonio, Texas. That's where correspondent Casey Stiegel is this evening. Hello, Casey.
Brett, good evening. As Sergeant Bergdahl prepares to spend his first full night back home here in the United States, as you know, new details are emerging about the time he spent in captivity. That information comes from senior military sources with knowledge of the reintegration process, and they tell Fox News that Bergdahl has told them he was locked away in solitary confinement for 2 straight years. He goes on to say that he did not see a human face the entire time, only speaking to his captors through the wall of a tiny 6-foot by 6-foot metal box. The 28-year-old Army sergeant says in the rare instances he was removed from that box, a hood was placed over his head. Now, when we asked military officials about the validity of these claims at a press conference held here at Brooke Army Medical Center earlier today, this is the answer we got.
We have no knowledge of any of that information at all, and no knowledge of what's been coming out so far in the decompression debriefings.
I'll talk about, in very broad terms, of captivity experiences. Many times captives are held by themselves. There are many books out there you can read about people who have survived that event.
Much of today's news conference focused on the complicated reintegration process. The first step is letting Bergdahl know he can control his actions once again. After 5 years in which he had no choice, reportedly, from what he ate to where he went to the bathroom. Now, he has not been exposed to any media at this point and is unaware of the coverage he's receiving and all of the controversy surrounding him. We learned that it will be up to Bergdahl himself to make the decision on when he wants to speak with his parents and when he wants to be reunited with him, but has not yet expressed a desire to do so. Today, his parents said they were, quote, overjoyed their son was back home in the U.S., but asked the public to respect their privacy. This reintegration process, we should say, could last days, weeks, or even months. Officials stress there is no timeline, but once it wraps up, that is when the formal investigation surrounding his mysterious disappearance back in 2009 will then begin. Brett?
Casey Stegall live in San Antonio. Casey, thank you. Up next, why Hillary Clinton might not be the shoo-in many people think she is if she runs for president. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 25 in Oklahoma City, where attorneys for a man executed in April in what was described as a botched procedure say the medical team failed to properly insert the IV tube prior to his death. Fox 4 in Dallas-Fort Worth, where the owner of a luxury house teetering atop a crumbling 75-foot cliff had it burned down today. Chunks of that cliff and the $700,000 house had been tumbling into a lake below. And this is a live look at Los Angeles from our affiliate there, Fox 11. The big story there tonight, word that embattled Clippers owner Donald Sterling has hired private investigators to dig up dirt on fellow NBA owners and league officials. They're trying to force Sterling to sell the team over racial comments that were leaked to a website. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.